Redditors who were almost moo asterisk deared. What's your story? Story 1. I used to work as a clerk at an appliance repair shop. One day, a customer brought in his riding lawnmower for repair. After getting an estimate, he decided the repair cost was too high and declined it. My boss then asked me to load the mower into our lift truck and deliver it back to the customer's house. I was 17 at the time and had just gotten my driver's license, so this felt like a big responsibility. I loaded the mower onto the truck, drove to the address, and carefully unloaded it into the customer's yard. That's when I noticed the battery wasn't connected. A technician must have removed it while inspecting the mower. I didn't have any tools with me to fix it, but the work order said, "Customer declined repair, needs new engine." I figured, no problem. If the engine doesn't work, he probably won't care. I rang the doorbell, and a shirtless, clearly tipsy man came to the door. The moment he saw the mower, he started yelling, "Why are you leaving this pile of junk in my yard?" Confused, I asked, "Is this not your riding mower?" He shouted back, "Yes, it's mine, but it's broken, and I don't want it anymore. What is wrong with you people?" I apologized and nervously asked if he wanted me to load it back up. For some reason, that made him even angrier. Without saying another word, he stormed back inside the house. While I was heading back to the truck to call my boss on the radio, this was before cell phones were common, the man came back outside holding a weapon. Suddenly, there was a loud bang, and the truck's windshield shattered. My ears were ringing so badly I could barely hear. Panicked, I jumped into the truck, started it, and reversed out of the driveway as fast as I could, nearly driving into a ditch across the road. Another shot rang out, hitting the passenger side of the truck and sending metal fragments flying into the cab. Some of the fragments hit my leg and left small cuts. I sped back to the shop faster than I had ever driven before. When I got there, I called my parents and told my boss I was done working there. The police arrived, took my statement, and arrested the man. Months later, I had to testify in court. Even though I never wanted to see him again, he only spent about 6 months in jail for what he did. Thankfully, by the time the case was over, I had moved away to college and didn't have to worry about him anymore. TLDR, a very angry man tried to hurt me because I dropped off his broken mower in his yard. Story 2. I was 13 years old. My friend and I were skateboarding, and for some reason a woman got really upset that we were skating on the sidewalk in front of her house. She started yelling loudly and angrily. We laughed it off and kept going. My friend went one way, and I went another. A minute later, I was still riding on the sidewalk heading back to my house when the same woman pulled up next to me in her car and started yelling again. I admit, I said some rude words back and told her to leave me alone. She kept driving slowly beside me, shouting the whole time. Eventually she drove off, but then she made a U-turn and came back toward me. I thought she was just going to pass by, but then I noticed she was actually steering the car straight at me. I froze, watching the car come at me. At the last second, my brain kicked in, and I jumped out of the way just as the car drove over the spot where I'd been standing. I'm not sure how fast she was going, but it looked like maybe 30 to 40 miles per hour. She kept driving, and I ran home as fast as I could. Later, she was arrested and pleaded guilty to a serious charge for trying to hurt me with her car. Story 3. When I was in high school, a new student started following me. He would walk behind me when I went home from school, stand outside my house, and even wait near my locker. It was really unsettling. I told my school counselor, but they didn't really believe me. Then I told a teacher I trusted, and he spoke to the principal. They said they would keep an eye out. But nothing seemed to change. After about a week, my boyfriend was frustrated that the school wasn't doing more to protect me. He confronted the student, and things almost turned into a fight. Eventually, the student was removed from school. About a month later, less than 3 miles from my house, that same student harmed a girl my age from our school and left her in a field. Story 4. My ex and I got into an argument because his behavior had become harmful, and I told him I was going to tell his family what he'd been doing. He became furious and tried to grab me, but I ran out of the room. He then headed for where he kept a firearm. So I went outside to make sure that if he tried to hurt me, the neighbors would see what was happening. I called 911 while standing outside. Luckily, the police were only a few blocks away. When they arrived, he was in the middle of loading his rifle. I pressed charges, but he only spent one night in jail. His father bailed him out, and even though I got a 5-year restraining order, I would still run into him around town. He later pleaded no contest and got only 3 years of probation. I eventually moved 3,000 miles away, but I still live with the fear of him. Story 5. When I was a freshman in college, I pledged a fraternity. During my first semester, I was assigned to work the door at a party, which was pretty normal. Around 1:30 or 2 a.m., a group of guys who work at the dining hall showed up. I remember one of them clearly because he made the best cheesesteaks. They each paid $5 for a cup. A few minutes later, the last keg ran out, and none of them got any drinks. As soon as they told me, I started counting out cash to give them refunds. But before I could hand it over, one of my very drunk pledge brothers decided to push them out the door while yelling and saying some nasty things. Once I got him to calm down, I grabbed the money and went outside to make things right. That's when everything went sideways. As I reached the bottom of the steps, the cheesesteak guy stepped forward, glaring at me. He said, "Y'all made a huge mistake. I'm packing," and then pulled out a handgun, pointing it directly between my eyes. For a split second, I froze. I was 18, and it felt like my heart stopped. I couldn't believe what was happening. Thankfully, a few older fraternity brothers ran outside and were able to talk him down before things got worse. But standing there, staring at that weapon, it felt like forever. I was unbelievably lucky to walk away unharmed that night. Needless to say, I didn't go near the dining hall cheesesteak station for a long time after that. Story 6. When I was 19, I dated a girl whose dad was extremely unstable. He was a little over 5 feet tall, but built like a rock. He had spent years in prison for drugs and violent crimes. One time, after someone cut him off in traffic, he followed the man, trapped his car, yanked the door open, and held a knife to the man's lap, threatening to seriously hurt him until the man wet himself. I didn't know most of this at the time. Me and my girlfriend lived together in an apartment. I worked afternoons. She worked mornings. So there were usually a few hours in the afternoon when nobody was home. One day I had the afternoon off and went to run errands. I came back during that empty time and found her father walking out of our bedroom. I asked what he was doing there, and because he liked me, he decided to be honest. He told me he was there to rob us. He was on drugs and going through a crime spree. He said he'd already robbed several people in the complex who were coming or going and then crawled in through our bedroom window. He said he looked around but hadn't found anything worth taking and was about to leave. Then he told me he wouldn't harm me, but if I ever told anyone what happened, including his daughter, I would vanish and no one would ever find me. Then he walked out. The whole time, all I could think was, don't give him a reason to snap. And I also remembered I had a coffee cup in the living room with almost $1,000 hidden in it. Luckily, he didn't find it. I never saw him again. My relationship was already shaky, and this gave me the push to finally leave. I didn't tell anyone what happened until after he passed away. Edit. I just remembered another moment that shows how extreme he was. He went away on a hunting trip. While he was gone, I came over one day after she got home from school. She was a senior in high school then. Her mom was at work. We just sat on the couch for a couple of hours. No joke. 3 hours later, he suddenly came walking out of the front coat closet. He told us he wanted to see what we'd do if we thought he was out of town. So he came home early and hid in the closet for hours, spying on us to see what would happen. Once he felt nothing was going on, he came out. I can't imagine what he might have done if we'd started fooling around. Story 7. I've told this before, but when I was younger, I witnessed something that still haunts me to this day. I was sitting in my Jeep with the top down, just minding my own business, when 2 guys started arguing on the sidewalk right in front of me. They clearly knew I was there, but they didn't care. Suddenly, one of them pulled out a homemade blade he had hidden in his pant leg and, without warning, drove it straight into the other guy's eye. I will never forget the awful sound it made, a horrible crunch that I can still hear in my nightmares. The attacker looked at me once and then ran off. I jumped out of my Jeep and rushed over to help, but it was bad, really bad. There was so much blood, and the man was making heartbreaking pain sounds. I stayed with him, talking to him and trying to comfort him until the ambulance arrived, but he passed away just as they got there. I ended up being the only witness, and I was ready to testify in court, but the attacker ended up pleading guilty. He was sentenced to 15 to 25 years in prison. It's been 25 years since that day, and I still have nightmares about it. It was one of the most terrifying moments of my life, something I'll never be able to unsee. Story 8. I was backpacking through South America and taking a night bus between two cities in Brazil. As some people know, night buses there can be dangerous, and unfortunately, I learned that the hard way. Halfway through the trip, a group of people stopped the bus and started robbing everyone. Since I was the only foreign traveler on board, they focused on me first. They took everything, my passport, cash, phone, all gone. After that, they locked me in a luggage compartment under the bus while they finished robbing the other passengers. The whole time, one of them kept pointing a weapon at me. It was terrifying. But here's the worst part. A week later, I was on another night bus and it happened again. Once more, they came straight to me, the only foreigner on the bus who didn't speak Portuguese, and demanded I hand over all my valuables. I was almost in tears, trying to explain that everything had already been stolen the week before. I had nothing left to give them. They dragged me off the bus, and at that moment, I was sure they were going to hurt me. But instead, just like before, they locked me in the luggage compartment again while they robbed everyone else. After that, I said no more buses. I booked flights for the rest of my trip. Edit. Even though I was robbed twice, Brazil is still the most amazing country I've ever visited. This all happened back in 2011, and during my 8 months in South America, I made lifelong friends, not just fellow travelers, but also a lot of incredible Brazilians. I wouldn't let my bad experiences scare anyone off. Just be safe and avoid doing what I did. I was young and reckless at the time. I wandered into dangerous neighborhoods without tours, partied too hard, and wasn't really thinking about the risks. Looking back, I'm lucky that getting robbed twice was the worst that happened. Oh, and on top of that, I caught dengue fever in the rainforest and got a terrible foot infection from hiking in wet boots for too long in the Amazon. Even with all that, I still say, go to Brazil. Spend at least a week in Rio. It's one of the most beautiful, vibrant places on Earth. Just stick to safer areas and take precautions. Story 9. This is my aunt's story, but it's too wild not to share. My aunt was almost a victim of a well-known criminal, Michael Swango, also known as a killer doctor. She worked as a unit secretary at the hospital ward where he worked regularly, and they actually knew each other pretty well. Part of his terrifying routine was secretly poisoning people he worked with. Later, after he was finally caught, he admitted that he'd been planning to target my aunt next. Luckily, some of his co-workers started getting suspicious of the behavior. Before he could go through with it, he skipped town and disappeared, which ended up saving my aunt's life. Story 10. I was being screamed at by my ex, like it often happened. I don't even remember what started it, but he grabbed my arm and pulled me off the couch. He began hitting me. It wasn't the first time. I'd learned to stay calm and not give him the reaction he wanted. If I didn't cry, he usually got bored and stopped. Suddenly, he shoved me against the wall and put his hand around my throat. I had trouble breathing, but I still didn't cry. I kept thinking I had to stay strong. Just as I felt like I might lose consciousness, I found the last of the strength I had and punched him hard in the ribs. He let go. Before I could catch my breath, I struck him below the belt. When he went down, I kicked his ribs a couple of times, then ran and locked myself in the bathroom. He eventually came and started his usual apologies. I knew I needed to leave. 2 weeks later, I did. It's been 8 years since then. Story 11. The last time I saw my ex was terrifying. I broke up with him while we were sitting in his car at a park. After that, he completely lost control. He grabbed me by the throat until I passed out. When I came to, He was driving on the freeway at over 100 miles per hour, slamming my head against the window and dashboard. At one point, when he got off the freeway, I managed to open the door and run into the street, screaming and waving for help, but no one stopped. He caught me and started trying to force me into the trunk of his car. Just then, a man pulled over and began recording what was happening. That distraction gave me the chance to run. I sprinted to a bus and got on before my ex could grab me again. I'll never forget the look in his eyes during those 2 hours. He didn't say a single word the entire time, which somehow made it even scarier. Later, his mom called me in a panic to warn me that he was looking for me. That was all I needed to hear. I packed up my things and moved across the country to stay safe. Story 12. I was coming home from a bachelor party at around 2 a.m. On the way back, I suddenly realized we had completely forgotten about the steak dinner we planned for the night. I didn't want to wake up my wife and baby by stumbling into the kitchen, so I asked the taxi driver to drop me off at a Dunkin' Donuts about half a mile from my house. This was before Uber existed. I bought a couple of egg and cheese bagels and started walking home. To be safe, I chose the quieter neighborhood streets instead of the busy main road, hoping to avoid any drunk drivers. About a block in, I noticed 2 guys walking toward me. For a second, I thought about crossing the street, but I didn't want to seem rude or make them think I was suspicious of them. They seemed like they were just heading home after a fun night too. When they got close, I gave them a friendly, "How you doing?" nod. They nodded back, and I felt good about my choice to treat them like regular people. But then, everything changed. As they passed me, one of them suddenly swung something heavy, a tire iron, and hit me hard on the back of my head. I fell into the street, but somehow stayed conscious. One guy held my arms down while the other pinned my legs and started going through my pockets. I told them to just take whatever they wanted, but they told me to be quiet or they would seriously hurt me. They asked where my wallet was. When I told them, they again told me to shut up or else. They took my wallet, my phone, and my watch. Then they kicked me a few more times before running off. I was bleeding badly and completely dazed. It was around 2:30 a.m., and without a phone, there was no way I could make it home alone. I saw a house nearby with the flickering light of a TV coming from an upstairs window. I crawled over, climbed onto the porch, and knocked on the door, yelling for help. The homeowner was understandably scared. It was the middle of the night, and he couldn't see me through his door's peephole because I couldn't stand up. I was covered in blood and barely hanging on, but I begged him to call 911 and an ambulance. I also asked him to call my wife. That seemed to convince him I wasn't trying to trick him. He opened the door slightly, with the chain still on, and handed me a cordless phone. He told me he wanted to help but asked me to stay on the porch because he had just redone his floors and, well, I was bleeding a lot. When the EMTs arrived, they decided to take me to the better hospital instead of the closer one. The problem? That route had several blocks of cobblestone roads. Being strapped to a stretcher with a head injury while bouncing on cobblestones is something I do not recommend. In the end, I needed 24 staples in my head. The doctor said I was incredibly lucky to have survived such a severe blow. But here's the really sad part. I never got to eat my egg and cheese bagels. Story 13. In the summer of 2018, I was staying in Extended Stay America in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. One evening, I took my dog outside so she could go potty. As we were heading back inside, a car suddenly pulled up and stopped near us. Just as I reached the door, I heard someone say, "Hey, nice dog." I turned around and saw a guy get out of the car, and he pulled out a knife. I didn't say a single word. I just told my dog to jump, scooped her up midair, sprinted inside, and slammed the door shut behind me. The impact was so hard that it actually jammed the old, worn-out lock into the engaged position. The whole building was in bad shape, practically falling apart. Heart pounding, I sprinted down the hall to my room, fumbling with my key card. As I finally got the door open, I glanced out the hallway window and saw the guy peeking inside the building, like he was trying to figure out which room I went into. I slammed my room door shut, locked it, and immediately called the front desk. I calmly told them, "Hey, the back door lock is broken. Oh, and there's a guy outside wandering around with a knife. The clerk didn't even sound surprised. They just sighed and said, "Again? All right, I'll call the police." Story 14. When I was little, maybe 4 or 5 years old, my family lived in a tiny town with about 1,200 people. It was mostly a farming community. My dad was a manager of the only bank in town. One day, a farmer missed several loan payments, and the bank had to foreclose on his farm. The farmer blamed my dad personally for it. Not long after, the farmer showed up at the bank with a rifle and threatened my dad. My father stayed calm and talked to him until the police arrived. The farmer was arrested and taken to court. But then, bail was posted and he was released. A few days later, my family was sitting down for dinner when we heard a truck stop outside our house. It was a very quiet street, so it immediately caught my dad's attention. He went to the window to see who it was, and there was a farmer, this time holding a shotgun. He walked right up to our front door and knocked. The second he knocked, my family bolted out the back door and ran to a neighbor's house as fast as we could. Our front door had been left unlocked. If he had tried it, he could have just walked right in. But thankfully, he didn't think to check it. The police were called again, and the farmer was arrested. For the next week, my family stayed in a hotel in another town until we got word that the farmer would remain in jail without the chance of bail. Story 15. My ex-stepdad is bipolar. After my mom left him, he had another severe episode. One night, he broke into our house and pointed a gun at us. I was only 11 at the time. He told me to go to my room and not to call the police. As soon as I got to my room, I called 911. When the police arrived and pulled up outside, he started firing through my bedroom door. He emptied the entire clip into it. Thankfully, I had already grabbed my cat and escaped out the window. I hid under the deck outside, shaking and terrified. I'm just grateful he shot the door and not my mom. Later that year, my half-sister was born, but sadly, she passed away as a baby. At her funeral, he actually showed up and kept trying to talk to me, acting like nothing had happened. He genuinely couldn't understand why I refused to speak to him. The most shocking part? He was never charged for what happened. He spent one weekend in a mental hospital, then was released and went right back to work as a teacher. I still don't understand how all of this was ignored, and how he was seen by the community as an upstanding person after everything that happened. Story 16. I was about 18, female, and had just moved to the city for university. One day I was driving near downtown when I suddenly saw police lights behind me. I pulled over like you're supposed to, but then I noticed something strange. The car was unmarked, and the man who got out was wearing plain clothes, not a uniform. As he walked up to my window, I saw another man in plain clothes get out of the passenger side and start walking up to the other side of my car. My gut instantly told me something was wrong. I panicked and hit the gas, flooring out of there in my rush. I think I ran over one of their feet. I tore off the street, going the wrong way down several one-way roads, and kept driving for about an hour in the opposite direction because I was convinced they might be following me. When I finally felt safe, I called the actual police to ask if they had tried to pull me over. They hadn't. They never found out who those guys were. Story 17. Probably late to the party, but here goes. I was a firefighter for about 15 years. Back when I was a rookie, we got a call about a smell of natural gas. Pretty routine. Normally, we just show up, stand around with lights flashing, and wait for the gas company to handle it. But this call was different. Even from 5 blocks away, we could smell gas inside the fire engine. To this day, it's the strongest smell of gas I've ever experienced in a home setting. 2 of us firefighters and 2 police officers went to check the house. The gas seemed to be coming from the basement. We managed to wedge open the old flip-up style garage doors and walked single file into the pitch-black garage, heading toward a door in the far corner that led to the basement. I only had my boots and bunker pants on since it was a hot day, no full gear. The moment we entered, the smell of gas was overwhelming. The lead officer shined his flashlight through the small window in the basement door, trying to see inside. Then he yanked the door open and froze. He shouted something, and we all rushed in after him. The basement was dark, humid, and filled with so much gas you could hear it hissing from somewhere in the room. I was third in line. I only made it 3 steps before slamming into the officers in front of me. They had stopped dead in their tracks. Then, in a calm but almost defeated voice, the lead officer said, "He has a lighter." Time seemed to slow down. In the back corner of the basement, slumped in an old recliner, was a thin middle-aged man holding an orange lighter. And right in front of us, he flicked it twice. We just stood there, frozen, expecting the entire house to explode at any second. I remember thinking, how big is the crater going to be after this? But nothing happened. After a few seconds, which felt like forever, our fight or flight instincts kicked in, and we all rushed him at once. He didn't fight back. In fact, he was barely conscious. We ended up having to carry him out of the basement. Later, we found out he had broken the main gas line where it entered the basement. He'd also left a note. It was clear he intended to take his own life, but it wasn't clear if he wanted to take anyone else with him. The medics took over, and I helped bag him all the way to the hospital. He never woke up while I was there, so I don't know what happened to him after. Looking back, I think the gas level in the basement was actually too high to ignite. There wasn't enough oxygen mixed in with it to cause an explosion. If there had been, we probably wouldn't have made it out alive. I was lightheaded after spending less than a minute down there, but it taught me lessons I've carried throughout my career. Lessons I always try to pass on to new firefighters. Story 18. This might be a bit of a stretch, but it's probably my closest brush with something scary at work. I was working at a university when a man called the office, saying he used to be a student and wanted to re-enroll. His situation was so unusual that the call was sent to me. After just a few minutes, I could tell something was off. It turned out he was calling from a mental health facility. He sounded lonely and just wanted to talk, so his calls were always sent to me. Over time, he started calling once a week or so. Most of the time, he just rambled about random things, but sometimes he would say some really wild stuff, like that he was secretly Jesus Christ, that he had helped found a university, that he owned the city's baseball team, or that he knew a secret word at a store in the mall that would get me free soap for life. I honestly thought I was helping a lonely man, so I always took his calls. Then, after about 6 months, campus safety called me. They said my dad was on campus to visit me, but couldn't find my office. My real dad lived several states away, so I instantly knew something was wrong. In the background of the call, I could hear someone talking and recognize the voice. It was the same man who had been calling me all those months. I told the officer that it was not my dad and that he definitely should not be allowed on campus. They were already suspicious, which is why they called me first. The officer on duty managed to get more information out of him. It turned out he had been released from a mental health facility that same day after a violent incident with a nurse. I don't think he was there to hurt me, but we were all extremely shaken. He still calls sometimes, but now we just forward him directly to the campus officer who knows him. Last I heard, he was calling from jail. Story 19. I live in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro. One day, I was at a bus stop near a drugstore. It was the middle of the day, and there were quite a few people around. Out of nowhere, a guy pulled his car over right in front of me and shot at me twice. Somehow he missed both times. Then he shouted at me not to move. I was terrified, so I froze. He walked up close and told me again that if I moved, he would hurt me. He patted me down, checking my pockets. He wasn't wearing a uniform or anything, so I had no idea who he was. Then he asked me what I was doing there. I told him the truth, that I was waiting for my friend. I even had my phone in my hand because I'd been texting her when it all happened. After a moment, he told me to walk away. So I did. A little bit of context. Where I live, the police system doesn't really work the way it should. If I had called them, there's a very real chance they might have treated me as a threat too. This has happened to several people I knew personally. In Rio, young black men are especially at risk of violence from the police. Because of this, in situations like mine, the safest thing to do is stay quiet, leave, and hope they don't come after you again. That's exactly what I did, and luckily, I never saw him again. Story 20. When I was 14, I left home because of serious mistreatment from my parents, physical, emotional, and mental. I was placed in a group rescue home that was meant to be short term. Most kids only stayed 2 weeks, but I ended up staying for 6. During that time, I saw many other kids come and go, most of them scared like me. Because I'd been there longer, the staff moved me into a small private room at the back of the house. I mostly stayed in that room or sat quietly in the backyard reading books. I tried hard to stay out of trouble and had even started making a few friends. Then there was Ernesto. He was close to aging out of the system and was in the home as a last chance to keep him out of jail. He'd had problems in every foster home he'd been placed in. His caseworker was trying her best to keep him safe and sheltered until he could join the military at 18. For some reason, Ernesto saw me as a threat and made his dislike obvious. I was only 14, very tall for my age, but underweight for my difficult home life. I absolutely wasn't a threat to him. A few days before I was supposed to be moved to a more permanent placement, one of the girls pulled me aside. She told me to lock my door at night and maybe even put something heavy in front of it. She and another girl had heard Ernesto muttering in Spanish about taking care of me and were worried. They were right to be. During a routine house inspection, staff discovered a large kitchen knife was missing. A search found the knife hidden under Ernesto's mattress. When the staff confronted him, he calmly admitted he had planned to attack me that night while I slept. The police were called, and he was removed in handcuffs. My placement was moved up to the next day. For obvious reasons, I didn't sleep much that night. Story 21. When I was a teenager, my friends and I decided to check out a local urban legend. There was this big park in town, and the rumor was that the street across from the park's entrance had a haunted house at the very end. One night, the 3 of us went to investigate. The small street ended at a long, straight driveway with trees arching overhead, making it dark and creepy. We pulled in slowly and started looking around. That's when we saw someone at the far end of the driveway. It was a man wearing a full white robe and hood, carrying what looked like a large weapon, and he was walking toward us with serious intent. I have never done a faster 20-point turn in my life. We got out of there as fast as we could. Later, I checked some local message boards and found out the truth. The house wasn't haunted at all. It turned out the local hate group used the abandoned building as a meeting place, and the man we saw was most likely a guard or lookout. Needless to say, we never went back. Story 22. My ex was extremely controlling and dangerous. He told me more than once that if I ever left him, he would kill me. But then he also said if I stayed, he'd hurt my mother, claiming it was to prove his love for me. Earlier in the relationship, he tried to convince me that he had harmed someone just because they had insulted me. He thought it would excite me, because he'd seen I like certain anime and games with yander characters, and he was convinced that I secretly wanted that kind of behavior in real life. As time went on, he tried to cut me off from everyone. He moved us to a tiny town with no grocery store. We had to buy food from a gas station, and tried to talk me into quitting the internet. He would ruin or throw away the food we bought, keep me from sleeping by thrashing around in bed, and even try to get me fired from my job. We worked at the same place, by dumping all his work on me. He wanted me burned out and dependent on him, so I would become his perfect partner who always agreed with him. It was like a real-life version of the taming of the shrew. I survived by being resourceful. I ordered pickup from the nearest restaurant almost every day, so he couldn't ruin my meals. I would sneak out of bed at night to sleep on the couch, then slip back before morning, so he thought I'd been there all night. I used my workplace's Wi-Fi on my phone to keep in contact with the outside world. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I reached out to my mom for help. Together, we made a plan. I told him I needed to visit my mom for a supposed medical appointment. She really is a cancer survivor, but the appointment was a story I made up. While he was at work on night shifts, I quietly packed my belongings into boxes and hid them all over the house, blending them into his mess so he wouldn't notice. When the time came, my mom waited down the street. He came home from work and fell asleep. As soon as he was out, I texted my mom to drive over. In 10 to 15 minutes, we grabbed all my things including the pets I wanted to take, and left. The entire time I was ready to run if he woke up, because I knew it could be dangerous if he caught me. By some miracle, we got out safely. My mom took me home first, and then I moved to a new place far away. I haven't seen or heard from him since. Story 23. First time I went to Miami. My girlfriend and I were visiting her family, and one night we were in Little Havana around 3 a.m. Her dad drove us and decided to stop at his mom's. When we left, we were tired and heading back to the hotel. I had no idea where we were. We pulled into a rough part town. I stopped for gas and to use the restroom. I normally wouldn't stop in a place I don't know, but it was his car, not mine. My girlfriend was asleep in the front seat. When I climbed back in, a man slid into the back seat. He scared the hell out of both of us and started demanding money and my watch. He pulled out a knife. I told him I had cash in the door pocket and that I was going to reach for it slowly. Instead, I grabbed my pistol, turned, and pointed at him. He backed out of the car politely and ran off. We waited about an hour for the police. They treated it like just another late-night robbery and told us not to stop in places we didn't know. They acted like this kind of thing happens all the time. I was glad the guy left quickly and that I didn't have to fire the weapon. It was one of those nights I won't forget. Story 24. I was walking down the sidewalk in Akron, Ohio, with a couple of friends. We had been at some college parties and were heading back home. It was late and the streets were pretty empty, except for one guy walking alone on the same sidewalk. Nothing unusual. It's the city, so we didn't think much of it. As we got closer, all of a sudden my friends took off running, diving into some bushes and cutting through someone's yard. I stopped confused and said, "What are you guys doing?" From behind the bushes, they started whispering urgently, "Get over here, now." I walked over casually, still not understanding what was going on, and that's when they pointed back at the guy. He was now standing only 5 feet from where I had just been. That's when I saw it clearly. He was wearing a ski mask that blended into the dark, which is why I didn't notice before. And he was holding a rifle, keeping it close to his body to hide it. He wasn't just hanging around. He was watching a house across the street, like he was about to do something really bad. I realized at that moment I had almost bumped right into him. We stayed hidden and didn't move until it was safe, and we got out of there as fast as we could. Story 25. Last time I shared this on Reddit, some people accused me of making it up, so I've been hesitant to talk about it again. But honestly, it feels good to finally get it off my chest. So here goes. I won't go into every detail, but in short, my former roommate secretly drugged me and almost ended my life. The strange part is, he didn't actually want me dead. He even helped keep me alive when I was at my weakest. At the time, I didn't realize what was happening. I just thought I was very sick. I couldn't move, and he would spoon feed me, which made me think he was being a great roommate. But as time went on, his behavior started to feel off. The vibes got so bad that I moved out in the middle of the night, without warning. Later, it came out that he was a predator. He's now serving a very long prison sentence, 30 years plus another 15, for drugging, assaulting, and filming his victims. Some of those victims are still missing. I eventually discovered that I appeared in one of his recordings, even though I had no memory of it all. That's when I knew for sure that I hadn't just been sick. He had been drugging me the whole time. Story 26. I had 2 best friends growing up, Bob and Tom. For about 4 years, we were inseparable. Then Tom had a girlfriend. Bob wanted her. They cheated behind Tom's back, and everything fell apart. After that, they wouldn't see each other, but I stayed friends with both. That woman got Bob into meth. Things went from bad to terrible fast. One day, Bob found Tom alone and attacked him with a skateboard, leaving Tom near death. Tom survived. Bob went to prison for 7 years for aggravated assault. At the time, I worked a small weed supply route and had regular customers. One day, I went to drop off some product to the guy. I'll call Jack. He answered the door holding a gun with a few people behind him. He asked if I was friends with Tom. When I said yes, he demanded to know where Tom was and threatened me if I didn't tell him. I lied and said I didn't know. Tom was actually sitting in my car a couple blocks away. To calm it down, I said I didn't want any part of their fight, gave them the product for free, and left. For months later, they tricked me into coming to a party so I could supply it. At the party, I was jumped in the garage by Jack and 4 others in front of a crowd. They beat me badly, punching, kicking, and stamping me. While no one stopped them, I was left with massive injuries. Broken ribs on both sides, many broken fingers, a broken jaw and cheekbone, a cracked eye socket, a broken nose, a fractured skull, a bad concussion, some bleeding in my brain, and I lost several teeth. I needed reconstructive surgery. Now I have titanium bars and plates, a lot of screws, and chronic migraines. Jack and his group were never arrested or charged. They walked away, and I left that city and never went back. People later told me that things caught up with some of them in different ways. Fights, an accident that put one in prison, addictions, and other bad outcomes. I heard about a few of those stories over the years, but I can't confirm every detail. After all that, Tom and I drifted apart. He wanted revenge and was eager to join any effort to go after Jack. I refused to be part of that. He joined the military and left town. I chose a different path. Story 27. This isn't my story, but one my mom told me a few years ago. When she was in her late teens, she was abducted by a man in his car. She said she didn't stop fighting the whole time, and eventually he let her go. When she told her parents what had happened, they didn't believe her. They thought she was making it up because she had been out past her curfew. Nothing ever happened to the man who did it. Looking back, I remember thinking my mom was paranoid. When I was younger, she always checked the backseat of her car before getting in and was constantly on alert for strange noises at home. Now I understand why. She told me the man had blindfolded or gagged her, maybe both. She couldn't clearly remember. She wasn't sure if the police ever got involved. But I believe her 100% because it affected her deeply. She even said, "I think that's why I started doing all those drugs back then." Thankfully, she got away, turned her life around, and quit the dangerous habits long before I was born. Story 28. I met a guy who had gone to school with my sister, so I felt like I didn't need to worry too much about him. But after only 3 dates, he started acting very strange, asking if I'd be friends with his ex. It was okay for him to keep private pictures of her on a computer, things like that. I ended it quickly and felt really creeped out. He went into a depression, and to keep him at a distance, I promised I'd help him set up a dating profile so he could meet someone else. It was mostly to get him out of my life. A year later, he texted me, thanked me, and said he'd gotten engaged. 6 months after that, it was all over the news. His new wife hadn't felt safe around him, so she locked him out of the house they had just bought. He broke in, shot her, and then turned the gun on himself. Both of them died. It's been 12 years, and it still haunts me. Part of me feels guilty because I'm the one who helped him make that dating profile, and part of me feels a dark kind of relief that it wasn't me. Story 29. When I was 12, my parents and I were out hiking. We were almost back to the car, walking along a trail with a steep drop-off on one side. Out of nowhere, a bullet flew past my head, so close that I actually heard it was by my ear. Then several more bullets came flying past. We had to duck and run for the last quarter mile back to the parking area, terrified. When we figured out what happened, it turned out some reckless kids had set up a shooting range down below. They had posted their paper targets above their heads, which meant they were firing toward the hiking trail without realizing people were up there. My dad completely lost it on them when he found out. I've never seen him so angry, and honestly, I don't blame him. It could have been a disaster. Story 30. I was 19, hanging out with some people at the edge of a park on the sidewalk. It was a spot where a local gang often hung out. None of us were gang members, but we were on good terms with them. Things were always friendly, and some of them even bought weed from the guys I was with. One dark Friday night, the streetlights were weak, and the usual gang members weren't around for some reason. We were just hanging out, drinking a bit, when a dark vehicle started slowly driving by. It caught our attention right away. There was a short kid standing next to me. His head came up to my chin. The third time I saw that vehicle, I decided to step away from the group and go to my car, thinking the people inside might get out and start a fight. As soon as I got inside my car to grab something, I thought we might need to protect ourselves. I heard and saw gunfire, probably a small caliber weapon, hitting the sidewalk a few feet in front of my car. Most of the guys ran into the park and hid in the brush where there were no lights. I ducked inside my car. By some miracle, no bullets came near me. When the vehicle disappeared, I got out and saw the short kid who'd been next to me lying on the ground. I thought he'd been shot in the neck or somewhere vital. But when I checked him, I saw he'd only been grazed across the top of his head. He'd been standing right where the shot came from. If I hadn't stepped away to my car, that bullet might have hit me instead. Thankfully, he survived. A few months later, I was sitting in my car a few blocks from that park, again in a poorly lit area. While waiting for someone to come out of a house, I heard gunfire exchange nearby. I saw a different vehicle than before, but with the same people inside. This time, they were shooting at an older gang member, someone I didn't know but recognized from his colors. He shot back at them. After the car sped away, I saw the man walking angrily past me. He punched a for sale sign in front of a house as he went by. After that night, I stopped hanging out there. Story 31. When I was 12 years old, a few bullies at my school attacked me while I was walking home. We'd had problems for a long time, so I knew something like this might happen eventually, but not to this level. They beat me so badly that I ended up with a broken right arm and several broken ribs. I spent weeks in the hospital recovering. Later, they were arrested and charged, and shockingly, they admitted that their goal wasn't just to hurt me. They wanted to get rid of me completely. Even now, I'm still in therapy, trying to heal physically and emotionally. I also refuse to walk anywhere alone unless I have some form of self-defense with me. It's been a long journey, but I'm just grateful to still be here. Story 32. Back in 1988, I had to transfer to a new work location. Luckily, I had a cousin in that town who was happy to let me stay with her until I found my own place. I'd been there only a couple of weeks. One Friday night, after a company softball practice, I parked in front of her house, opened the trunk to get my gear out, and someone grabbed me by the hair and slashed my neck. Blood poured everywhere. I felt my knees holding my throat, completely shocked, with no idea who had attacked me or where they'd gone. I honestly thought, this is it. This is how I die. But I didn't die. In fact, I didn't even feel that bad at first. Then I noticed a man trying to break into my cousin's house. I assumed that was the attacker. I figured if I was going to die, I wasn't going to go quietly. I reached into my trunk, pulled out my Mickey Mantle signature Louisville Slugger. I played hardball back home and went after him. I was just over 6 feet tall, a year out of the military, more than 200 pounds. He was shorter and smaller. I fought him until I passed out. When I woke up, I was lying on my cousin's lawn. The other man was a few feet away, not moving. I knew I was badly injured and needed a hospital. My cousin wasn't home. She and her mom were in the city at a show. I decided to drive myself to the ER. Problem was, I'd only lived there 2 weeks and didn't know where the hospital was. And I was covered in blood. I couldn't exactly walk into a gas station for directions looking like a horror movie extra. So I changed clothes, cleaned myself up as best I could, but there was still a huge wound on my neck. To avoid scaring anyone, I pulled on a turtleneck sweater and drove off. At the hospital, I calmly told the nurse, "I've been attacked. My throat was cut. I think I need to be admitted." She looked at me skeptically and asked to see the injury. When I pulled the collar down, she went white as a sheet, sat me down, and told me not to move. Later, the surgeon told me my carotid artery had been missed by about 1/16 of an inch. My jugular vein had been nicked, but not severed. In the ER, someone recognized my cousin's last name and asked if they could call her father, who was a doctor. They pumped me full of blood and rushed me into surgery. By the time I woke up, my uncle the doctor and his son the attorney were both there. There were months of legal issues and medical bills afterward. I survived. My attacker, my cousin's ex-boyfriend, is long gone. She had broken up with him because of his violent, self-destructive behavior, and he apparently thought I was her new partner. I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, but by some miracle, I'm still here. Story 33. I've had some pretty wild and dangerous experiences over the years. One of the scariest was when a 17-year-old I was fostering stabbed me. Another time, a man broke into one of the trailers I own. He was clearly under the influence, and when I told him to get out, he fired a shot at me. Then there was a tenant who secretly built a drug lab in the basement of one of my houses. I called the police, and he ended up serving 5 years in prison. When he got out, he came after me and tried to shoot me. Once, someone shot at my van while I was sitting inside. I still don't know if they were actually aiming for me or just firing randomly. On top of all that, I've been hit in the head with bottles more times than I can count. 4 times with beer bottles and once with a full glass bottle of liquor. Those were just the ones bad enough to land me in the hospital. This is all part of my work. I'm a real estate investor who focuses on low-income housing, Section 8 homes and trailer parks in Memphis and parts of Arkansas. It's a tough business and sometimes a very dangerous one. Story 34. I had an ex who was abusive. For some reason, he liked biting me. One day we were just hanging out, and suddenly he leaned over and started biting my neck while put his full weight on top of me. It crushed my throat, and I couldn't breathe. I started punching with my free hand, but he grabbed my wrist and held me down. I tried to scream, but nothing came out, so I decided to go limp and play dead. Even after I went limp, he didn't let go. In my head, I had this clear, horrible thought. He's going to kill me. After what felt like forever, he finally stopped. I was gasping for air and sobbing. He looked at the mark on my neck with no feeling in his eyes and said, "You left a mark. You'll have to cover that up." Story 35. Back in 1988, 2 drunk GIs, me and my buddy, were wandering around Austin, Texas, just off 6th Street. It was about 2:30 a.m. The bars had just closed, and we were so messed up from drinking and partying that we couldn't even find our cars. While searching, we ran into a drunk local guy. He joined us, hoping at least one of us would remember where a car was parked. Eventually, we drifted a few blocks east, where it was darker and quieter. We spotted this tiny building, maybe a bar, maybe someone's apartment, with dark curtains on the windows, faint neon light glowing behind them, and music playing inside. Just as we were about to pass an alley, 3 rough-looking guys shuffled out and started talking to us. They tried to grab us, saying things like, "You need to get in here. The cops will get you." Even though we were messed up, we weren't about to trust these strangers. We shoved them away, threw a couple punches, and they stumbled back into the darkness of the alley. We barely got 10 feet past them when, boom, 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 gunshots rang out, lighting up the area with flashes like something out of a horror movie. Voices were shouting in between the shots. We ran like our life depended on it, sprinting for 2 blocks before ducking into a small parking lot and hiding behind some cars. The local guy looked around and said, "I'll be darned." We turned to look. We were hiding right next to his car, a Monte Carlo. I won't get into what happened during the next 20 minutes, but let's just say he got mad enough that he kicked us out of his car. It was a wild, weird drug-fueled night. Way too much alcohol, too many close calls. Looking back, I'm just glad to still be here to tell the story. Story 36. I was living with my first serious boyfriend. We were on and off because he kept sending inappropriate messages to other women. Even though I knew better, I took him back and we got an apartment together. One night, the neighbors across the street invited us over for tequila. We hung out for a while and then went back home. He went to the bathroom and something just felt wrong. I checked his phone and found pictures and texts that made it look like he was single. When he came out of the bathroom, I started yelling at him. He rushed me, shoving me backwards onto the couch I was standing in front of. When I landed, he stumbled and fell to his knees, and then bit me on the knee. I started punching him in the face to get him off me. When I finally broke free, I grabbed my phone and flip-flops and ran out the door. I stayed in alleys as long as I could, trying to make it to a friend's house. Not even 3 minutes later, as I walked up a main road, he came speeding down the street in my car, jumped curb, and almost pinned me to a wooden fence. This wasn't even the first time he'd scared me. He had already held a gun to my head twice before this. Yes, I was very naive. I'm just Thankful I got away and survived that night. Story 37. I have an ex who was extremely abusive. On the last night I was with him, he had been drinking and using drugs for several days straight. He became very paranoid, convinced that I was going to leave him. I woke up in our room to find him standing over me with a gun pointed at my head. By this point, I was so afraid of him that I had been sleeping with a knife under my pillow. I just reacted. I stabbed him in the leg, which threw off his aim. He fired, and I was shot in my left shoulder. While he was distracted, trying to pull the knife out, I ran for the door. As I reached it, he threw another knife, hitting me in the back and puncturing my right lung. He was always disturbingly accurate with knives, even more than with guns. A neighbor heard the gunshot, broke down the door, and saw me lie on the floor, covered in blood. He immediately acted, shooting my ex in the leg and restraining him until EMS and police arrived. I don't remember much after the knife injury, but I was told later that I had been choking on my own blood and went into cardiac arrest on the way to the hospital. If I hadn't already been injured before that night, with broken bones and a head injury from the day before, it might not have been so severe. I spent some time in a medically induced coma so my body could heal. Knowing that the EMS team saved my life inspired me to go into the medical field myself. Story 38. I was a young, naive 19-year-old working my very first serving job at a bar. I became friends with the cook. He was nice, but a little rough around the edges. One night, around 3 a.m., he asked me for a ride home. I didn't think twice and said yes. On the way, he asked if we could make a quick stop at a friend's house because he had something to give him. We stopped, and two men got into the back of my car. A drug deal went down right there. I was already uncomfortable, but then everything went horribly wrong. One of the guys in the back pulled out a gun and aimed it directly at the cook's head, demanding all of his money and weed. Then he turned the gun on me. I didn't have anything on me to give him. Suddenly, a shot went off, and a bullet went straight through my windshield, right above my head. At first, I didn't even realize what had happened because my ears were ringing and I couldn't hear. Then I looked up and saw a bullet hole in the glass, with fragments scattered across my dashboard. Coming from a sheltered family in the suburbs, I was completely in shock. The two men in the back jumped out of the car and ran. The cook quickly told me, "Drive around the corner. I have a friend nearby." Still in a daze, I did as he said. He ran into a house, and for some reason, my dumb self followed him inside. The second I walked in, I saw people putting on black ski masks and grabbing large weapons. That was the moment my brain finally clicked into survival mode, and I ran right back out of there. Looking back, I realized just how close I came to being caught in a drug deal gone wrong. I moved away about a year later and never told my parents. They would have completely lost their minds if they knew what had happened. Story 39. When I was about 10 or 11, I was selling Girl Scout cookies with my troop. My cousin was in the troop too, and we were paired up together that day. We were in Tulsa, Oklahoma, at this strip mall shaped like a U. Most of the buildings there were abandoned, but because there were newer stores nearby, it was still a great spot to sell cookies. Lots of foot traffic. At one point, my cousin and I wandered a little too far, walking around a mostly empty side of the strip mall. That's when a tan car pulled up next to us. There were 3 large men inside, and they slowed down as they drove alongside us. They started asking us questions like, "Are you alone?" And one of them even began opening his door while the car was still moving. My grandma was at the end of the strip mall where it connected to the main road, and she saw what was happening. She immediately started yelling for us. Just as one man got completely out of the back seat, and we started running, a police car pulled up right in front of them, blocking their path. It was like the officer appeared out of nowhere, a total lifesaver. The men jumped back in their car and sped off as fast as they could. Years later, I swear I saw one of those men walking near that same area. My cousin and I haven't been back since, and after that terrifying day, I quit Girl Scouts for good. Story 40. When I was 18, my parents kicked me out. The only place I could afford was a tiny, rundown apartment in a really bad area. I lived on the second floor, and the guy who lived below me was unhinged. He used drugs heavily and would constantly harass me, making inappropriate comments and accusing me of being too loud, even though I was always quiet. My boyfriend usually spent the night with me because he was worried about my safety. One night, we drove back to my place in my car instead of his truck. He went to take a shower while I started getting ready to fold some laundry. As I walked to the living room carrying a heavy basket full of towels, I accidentally dropped it. It made a loud thud. Seconds later, there was a knock at my door. I was wearing pajama shorts and a tank top, so I thought it was no big deal. I opened the door and it was him, the neighbor. He immediately started screaming at me, saying that I was too loud again and that this was the last straw. I tried to shut the door, but he forced his way in and shoved me to the floor. Before I could even react, he was on top of me, tried pulling my shirt, and then suddenly he froze. I looked up and saw my boyfriend, standing there with his gun pointed directly at the guy's head. My boyfriend is fully licensed and legally allowed to carry. In the calmest voice I've ever heard, he said, "Please get up and walk out of this apartment before you lose something very important to you." The neighbor slowly got up and left without saying a word. I know in my heart that if my boyfriend hadn't been there, something terrible would have happened to me. The very next day, I broke my lease 8 months early and got out of that place for good.